Welcome to the Hockey Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Knopp, with my co-host, Matthew Zator. And today we are on our Capitals season preview for the 2022-23 NHL season. And we are joined by our Capitals correspondent, Luke James. Luke, how are you today?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Really been looking forward to talking on the pod.
We're excited to have you, and glad that we were able to get our schedules to work out, because if you may or may not know, if you follow Luke, he hails to us from England. So it's quite a treat to have you on today. All right, well, let's jump right into it. We're going to talk Capitals today, obviously. So let's talk forwards first. Let's talk about some of those newcomers that have come in. What are your expectations for Dylan Strome and Connor Brown?
It's going to be really interesting for them too. And we'll talk more about kind of the injury situation that the Capitals have. And obviously it all fits into that kind of context. Strome last season, 48 points in 69 games for Chicago. That's pretty impressive considering how bad Chicago were, frankly. Also 6'3", so really does fit into that profile that Washington were looking for in terms of size and physicality. Again, injury situation means that there's a clear position for him in the top six. And I think the most impressive part of this, and I wrote about this recently, he comes in at a $3.5 billion hit against the salary cap, which is really, really impressive value considering what he can offer in terms of leadership, in terms of his leadership ability, in terms of what he offers on the ice. So that's really, really good. And I think the other thing to mention on top of that in terms of Dylan Strome is he's only 25, which, considering the Capitals have been one of the oldest teams in the NHL for quite a while, that's important, especially given health concerns that, again, is a major theme of this offseason and the season to come in terms of Washington. So, yeah, that's what I'd say on Dylan Strome. In terms of Connor Brown, last year he had 39 points in 64 games for Ottawa. He's a little bit smaller, 6 foot, but again, there are spaces for him in the top six, possibly even in the top line, which should be interesting. The important thing in terms of Connor Brown as well is the $3.6 million cap hit, which is so important because the Capitals, once again, up against the salary cap, have obviously an LTIR to deal with as well. So that's important. And I think the thing to remember here as well is he obviously had that experience as an alternate captain in Ottawa, which is always useful. The caveat, again, this is something to bear in mind. It's been a while since Washington won in the playoffs, and Connor Brown hasn't done any winning in the playoffs either. So that's something to bear in mind going forward. But no, in terms of the duo, I think for how much they're costing against the salary cap, really, really good business.
The story inside the story, if you will. And I remember, before I turn over to you, Matthew, I remember Dylan Strome when he was coming up through with Erie and in his draft here, and he was always talked about as maybe being on the undersized side, and now he's 6'3". So that's what you never know when you're going to draft, when they're only 5'11", 6 foot at the draft when they're 18 by the time what happens when they turn 25.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's big. Like, Luke, you mentioned a big piece of the Capitals is gone to start the season and possibly the whole season, right? So, and that's Nicklas Backstrom. Big part of the top six, big part of, first, second line, whatever you want to call it on the Capitals. How much will the Capitals miss the presence of this guy? I mean, he's a huge part of the team, huge part of the offense for the last, since he's been drafted and since he debuted with the team. So what do you think about his loss to start the season here?
It's huge, and on multiple levels. So last year, to fill people in, he had 31 points in 47 games, which, considering the condition that he was playing in, is actually pretty impressive. And considering what he said recently in the Swedish press in terms of daily life being a struggle with his hip injury, that is, really, really jumps off the page in terms of production. That's great. He also, even more impressively, considering what he said in Expressen, he had 6 points in 6 playoff games in a losing effort with a dodgy hip. Again, really impressive. So, of course, it's a huge loss for the Capitals, not just in terms of the quality that he offers on the ice, but also his impact as a leader. He's been around for a long time in Washington. So that is a really big issue. And I think, aside from the short term, Washington have to deal without one of the most important top six forwards, you also have the fact that the surgery he had, which was hip resurfacing surgery, it wasn't a replacement per se, is really tough. Like, it involves basically shaving down the hip joint and putting some metal on it. It's not ideal. It's a long recovery time. He's already 34. And the other thing to bear in mind as well, once he does come back, and it's assuming that he will come back, he's $9.2 million against the cap, which is going to be difficult at the best of times to live up to as a 34-year-old. But a 34-year-old coming off of a major surgery, that's a concern. So yeah, in terms of the team's viability as a playoff club going forwards, a lot hinges on Nicklas Backstrom.
Yeah, as someone that lives an hour outside of DC, he certainly does mean a lot to that community. And to see him go down with this type of injury, like you said, that it affects him in day-to-day life is just kind of awful to see. So let's talk about a rookie that kind of came up last year and has a chance to step forward and fill that role of the Backstrom absence, and that would be Connor McMichael. So do you see him taking that step forward in his development because of all that extra ice he will see as a result of Backstrom's injury, or do you think he might regress this year?
It really, really depends on how he's used. And it's kind of the obvious thing to say there, but there has been this long-term talking point surrounding the Capitals about, are they getting the most out of McMichael? Is he playing the right kind of role? Is he playing enough minutes? So it completely depends on whether Peter Laviolette trusts him to play in those high-pressure moments, which, considering the history there, is a major question mark. And I think it will we'll see how it unfolds as the season gets underway next month. I think the important thing to remember, though, about McMichael, in terms of the people who say, yeah, he's going to go on, he's going to be this top six forward, he's still only 21, approaching his second season in the National Hockey League, had 18 points last year in 69 games, the 69 games split across kind of one in the previous season and 68 last year. And that's in relatively limited usage. So I think if he's given the opportunity, he'll shine. But the big talking point continues to be, will or when will he get that opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I really like his game. And the thing is, like, I think he does. I mean, yeah, like you said, there are a few different things. Like Dylan Strome is going to get a lot of those minutes too, and true. Connor Brown potentially. So, I mean, I don't know. It depends, like you said, on where he's used, how he's used with the coach. And that's just going to be, it's all hammered out in training camp, preseason, and season itself. So we'll see. I'm hoping he does, because I really like how he plays, and he had a really good season in his first season. So I'm hoping he does get that opportunity, and we'll see if he can take the ball and run with it and score some goals. And he'll probably get on the power play because, without Backstrom, there's still going to be a spot for him. So we'll see what happens. But there are other guys that are going to have to step up. Other than him, that's a lot to put on a rookie or a second-year player. So who needs to step up the most without Backstrom in the lineup? I mean, they have other guys that are going to have to do it. So who do you see as being the guy that needs to do it the most?
For me, I'd say TJ Oshie, is someone who's really, really interesting. So last year he had, again, one of these Asian players on the Capitals, had some injury problems. He only made 44 regular season appearances, producing 25 points. But let's caveat that by saying that in the postseason, rather, he put up 7 points, which included 6 goals in 6 playoff games. So that's really impressive. And in terms of being able to step up from what he produced last season to this season, I think he can do it, despite kind of the fact that kind of regression curves, age curves come into this. He sounded really, really upbeat in the final media appearance that he gave last season. And I think this coming season, he has a huge role to play, especially, as we say, without Backstrom, with Tom Wilson sidelined, at least in the short term as well. Oshie is someone who they've got to look towards as being a guy who can change games and win games.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about Oshie. I mean, he's always so much fun to watch, and it'll be interesting to see what he can do this year without Backstrom and Wilson there to kind of support him. All right, well, one issue we all have to talk about, or not issue, storyline, I should say. And as one of our good friends and colleagues of the show and my writer on the Morning Skate, Christy Flannery, always says, if you're outside of DC, this is the only reason you pay attention to the Capitals. But Alexander Ovechkin is chasing Wayne Gretzky's record. So how much closer do you expect Ovechkin to get to that record this season?
Well, I'll say he'll certainly be an issue for other teams' defenses.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, to think about this season. I think it's worth putting this in context a little bit. So last year, Ovechkin scored 50 goals, putting him on a total of 780. Gretzky, for what it's worth, is on 894. Gordie Howe, who's second in the all-time list, is on 801. So I did a little bit of writing about this recently because, as you say, Ovechkin is one of the major, if not the major storyline in Washington. He always will be for the duration of this contract, probably.
Yeah.
So if he scores at exactly the same rate as last season, and of course that's a big if because the injury is he's a year older, the conference is better than it was last season as well. If he does score at the same rate as last season, he will overtake Howe before December 25th. So the final game before Christmas, he will overtake Gordie Howe. It's a big if, isn't it, in terms of his production this season? It is a really big if, and we'll talk a bit more about this later. But I think Ovechkin probably scores somewhere in the region of 40 to 48 this season. Okay. I can't see him sustaining it because he's a year older. It's difficult. The team, I think, has gone a little bit backwards. The division has gone a little bit forwards. And he was a little bit slower after Christmas as well in terms of the goals that he put up. So, yeah, somewhere between 40 and 48 this year.
Good totals.
I'd still take a 40 goal scorer out of him, that's a solid season.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's still going to score 40 even if he stays an off year. I mean, well, he's just so good and everyone just expects that from him. And of course he expects it of himself too. So
yeah,
he's just an amazing player to watch. And that's a big storyline whenever he plays and whatever he does. So that's going to be fun to watch him again this season. Okay, well, let's get to the end of this and start talking about matches. We've talked about the division. Now it's gotten better. And this Metro division is probably I'd say the most competitive in the NHL this year. So how do you think this forward group as it stands right now matches up with those other strong teams in the Metropolitan Division here?
So I kind of see it in a couple of tiers, if that makes sense. So at the bottom, I see Philadelphia and the New York Islanders being in that kind of region. In the middle, I have Columbus, Pittsburgh, and Washington. And then towards the top, I have Carolina and the New York Rangers as being the top two in this division. I think it's going to be tough this year for the Capitals. A lot of it does depend on Ovechkin. And again, we mentioned kind of 40 to 48 goals being an astoundingly high figure. I don't think I could credibly predict less is the thing. It's just like, what are the expectations? Even though it does sound ridiculous, and I understand that it sounds ridiculous. And I think the important thing to remember in terms of contextualizing that is that he's the center of attention on the power play as well.
Yeah.
So provided that power play isn't rubbish, he's going to score X number on the power play because we know Ovid in the office is going to have that shot and he's going to score a fair few. So I think that's kind of the context here. So yeah, for me, the offense in Washington somewhere in the middle of the pack in the Metro this year.
That's fair. I think that's a good assessment for where they are. And, that puts them in the playoff hunt still. And I think if they're in that hunt, they're happy going into the final months of the season this year. All right, well, let's move on to the defense, shall we, Luke? I want to talk about your expectations for their newest addition, Erik Gustafsson. What do you expect out of him this coming season?
So just to start off, I think it's a really clever pickup for Washington. He's only being paid $800,000 against the salary cap. There's nothing really to complain about there. Structurally, I think it's a really good addition as well because it will allow Trevor Van Riemsdyk to move back to the right side, which is his natural side. That should be good. I expect him to slot in on the bottom pair, on the third pair with Van Riemsdyk. So yeah, I think that's good news for Van Riemsdyk. It's good news for the team. Without getting into the weeds in terms of plus minus being a bit of a maligned statistic, he was only -4 on the Blackhawks last season, which isn't too bad, I think, considering kind of the leakiness of that defense at certain points, especially at the start of the year. And also he registered 18 points in 59 games. So if he can be of that kind of level, I think in terms of third pair usage, a really smart addition for Washington.
He used to be a big deal too.
Yeah.
In Chicago on his first stint there, what was he like? 60-point defenseman one year and then kind of fell off. And this past year, like Blackhawks banter, they did not like him. So I don't know. So we'll see. He's going to be in a lesser role and not. I mean, I don't know if he was in a big role in Chicago too, but we'll see what he does. That he still has that big shot on the power play. I mean, he can still kind of do that. But yeah, like you say, that -4, I mean, even though the plus minus statistic is flawed, I mean, that's still pretty good on a team that's giving up a lot of goals. So
yeah,
that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. let's talk about the big guy on defense, who's still the big guy in defense. He had 71 points last season. Obviously, he's still the number one defenseman in Washington. Do you think he continues that or starts kind of regressing? Because he is getting up there in age, but he's getting also up there in the record books for Washington Capitals defensemen. So do you think he still is a 70-plus point guy, or does he kind of drop back in this coming season?
I don't necessarily see why not in terms of John Carlson being able to produce another season like that. As you say, 71 points in 78 games last season. And it's important to remember that he was playing alongside a rookie most of the time as well, which, considering if he does stay in the same pair this year, and I expect them to keep those kind of pairs fairly settled beyond what we've just mentioned, his defensive partner is going to be better. He's going to help him out. And yeah, I think we could be in for another kind of year in that kind of points range. Again, I'd adjust it down a bit because I don't think the Capitals are going to be quite as far clear in terms of the playoff hunt this year. So less points, but I think still pretty solid. And again, he was one of those guys across the whole league who performed really, really well last year, and he slipped under the radar a little bit. So yeah, John Carlson is looking good. The caveat that I would make, though, is that he's on an $8 million contract until 2025, 2026. He's already 32. So if he doesn't have a good season this year, that's problematic for the team going forwards, because it would kind of suggest that we are on, or rather the team is on a major downward slope. And I think that would be a point of concern. And again, that's a pretty divisive contract in terms of how it's looked up amongst the fan base as well. So yeah, he's under pressure this year to deliver, which is, again, a little bit crazy considering he did put up 71 points in 78 games alongside a rookie on a team that finished in the wildcard spot. So yeah, John Carlson, for me, I don't see, beyond a freak injury or whatever, I don't see why he couldn't continue on a similar path.
Speaking of rookie defensemen, Martin Fehervary had a very good first full season in the NHL. Do you suspect this to continue and solidify his top 4 defenseman status, or is he going to see a little bit of a regression?
I really like his game. I think he's one of, in terms of the players that I watch on the Capitals, he's one of the ones that I enjoy watching the most in terms of what he offers the team, both ends of the ice. He's just solid. And there's something good about the fact, of course, he was picked in the second round as well. There's something satisfying in terms of a squad management perspective that this guy has come in. Nobody thought he'd be playing top pair minutes with John Carlson this year. And he smashed it. He did really, really well. What did he put up last year? He had 17 points in 79 games, which is fine considering he's doing more of the defensive work. Carlson obviously doing more of the offensive work. So for me, another year older, yeah, I'd be pretty optimistic about him in terms of being a top 4 defenseman. The only kind of catch that I'd kind of apply to this, wasn't at his best in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Obviously the most important time of the year. And he followed that up with a fairly average run of performances at the World Championships with Slovakia as well. But again, that's after a long season where he played more hockey than expected. He's still in his early 20s. But for me, Fehervary is someone to keep an eye on for the years ahead. He's going to be good.
I'll have to add to your point, he did look very fatigued in the playoffs. I'll be honest, I didn't notice him at all at the World Championships, which can be a good thing for defensemen, but I don't think it was for him in terms of like how he should have been stepping up and being a better player. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There was some sort of fatigue or, just kind of caught up at the end of the season last year with him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a really good, he's going to continue to progress because he's really young in his first season and playing on the top pairing is pretty good. And he really, really impressed me for sure all throughout the year. So, of course, we had to mention him because of that. So,
absolutely.
We'll see. All right, let's talk about Matt. You said about the middle where Capitals were in offense on the forward side. Let's talk about the defense. Where do they kind of match up in this Metropolitan Division on the defense core side?
You might sense a theme here. I think somewhere in the middle as well, in terms of Washington's blue line. Honestly, somewhere in the middle. I really like the top pair. I like Fehervary. I like him with Carlson. I think they'll get along fine. I think pairing Gustafsson with Van Riemsdyk on the bottom pair is a really underrated piece of business. And again, they're both on really, really cheap contracts.
Yeah.
So even if they are replacement level or perform as replacement level kind of third pair defensemen this year, that's completely fine because you are paying them at the rate of a third pair defenseman. So that's completely fine with me. It's the second pair where I'm a little bit more concerned. So Dmitry Orlov with Nick Jensen is where I think it drags them down a little bit. So again, I think somewhere in the middle. And I think, again, that's fine in terms of the broader picture of where this team is going. There's a lot of talk about, is the window to win still open? Has it already shut? I think it's probably already shut, but they're still there or thereabouts. And I think if there or thereabouts is enough, and I think because they haven't retooled in a big way, they're continuing with this core, there or thereabouts probably is good enough for the organization at this point. So for me, yeah, I think somewhere in the middle, which is probably where they expect to be.
Yeah.
Speaking of that window being still open or starting to shut, the Capitals brass believes it's still open because they went out and picked up 2 new goaltenders, including Stanley Cup champion Darcy Kuemper. So how does the new tandem of Kuemper and Charlie Lindgren compare to the tandem of Samsonov and Vanacek from last year? Are the question marks going to continue for the Capitals this year, or have they selected their new elite duo?
The question marks continue, but the thing to say is that they're different question marks. And it's a difficult one. And again, last season, it was my first season writing about the Capitals for the Hockey Writers. I kept coming back to goaltending time and time and time again because it was such a big issue. And I played soccer. I was a goalkeeper. And I look at it and I say, these two guys are wildly inconsistent. And throughout the season, I kind of gravitated more towards Vanacek as the guy I would have kept.
Yeah.
Because lower ceiling, if Samsonov reaches his potential, but much more trustworthy. And he seemed to be a little bit more confident. He seemed to be the guy that they trusted more. So to go back to kind of the history of this, I'm surprised when they let both of them go, or got rid of both of them rather. So that's where I'd start. In terms of Kuemper and Lindgren, provided the Stanley Cup winning goalkeeper doesn't suffer a major injury and he can play a similar number of games as last season. So he played 57 regular season games last year. I think he'll be fine. I think the tandem will be just about okay. The issue is, well, what if he can't play a similar number of games, either through injury, which again is entirely possible. He's in his 30s and injuries, goalkeepers happen all the time. Or what if he does kind of decline next season? What if next season isn't good? It's important to remember that he spent most of the playoffs retraining his eye. Which is pretty important as a netminder, I would imagine. So that's a point of concern. And the reason I say that's a point of concern is Lindgren is completely untested as a number 2 kind of over a prolonged period. So last year he posted really, really ridiculously good numbers in St. Louis. His save percentage was a 958 through 5 games. But the 5 games is much more important than 958 because sample sizes that small don't really tell you anything. And his NHL statistics before that were middling. And he had a great season in the American Hockey League last year. But the question is, can he do it as a number 2? What kind of number of games will he be expected to play? And if for whatever reason Kuemper doesn't work out or gets injured, how will that unfold? So for me, I think they're better. I think if we're giving them like an NHL 23 rating, I think the goaltending situation is better, but still really big question marks.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that's the thing. You bring in 2 new guys and they don't know the defense and all that stuff too. So it's going to take some time for them to even, learn everything and learn who they have in front of them when they're used to a different team. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be the biggest to watch for throughout the season for sure.
I agree.
Okay, well, you went middle. Let's see, where do you see the goaltending in this division? I mean, obviously the Rangers
want to take a shot in the dark.
Obviously, the Rangers are at the top with Shesterkin, I would say. But where does this duo kind of fit in?
Well, both New York teams obviously have really good goaltending, so that's important to remember. And for that reason, I slide them slightly below the middle in terms of their net minding. Again, still in that median range. It's not brilliant. It's not terrible. It's not the end of the world either way. And I think it will work out, fingers crossed, if you're a Capitals fan. I think that's all that the organization can really be thinking. I wrote about this just after kind of both of those deals happened, and basically saying, you often hear, especially in hockey, goaltending is voodoo, when really it isn't. Like, NHL teams spend a lot of money and a lot of resources scouting goaltenders, training goaltenders, doing video work on goaltenders, the nutrition side, the kind of performance, the physical performance side. A lot of work goes into it. If it was just luck, they'd throw whoever in, wouldn't they? But it's not just luck. And I cover the elite league here in the UK, and you can see the good goaltenders from the bad ones. There is some obviously in it. And the issue that Washington have this year is Lindgren might be really, really good, or he might not be. And it's a massive, massive risk, especially if goaltending makes or breaks the season. And often in hockey, it does. So yeah, that's why for me, just below the middle. But again, if it works out, they'll look like geniuses. If it doesn't, an issue.
I'm a little more invested in that storyline this year, just because on my team that I coach, I have the daughter of the goaltender coach for the Washington Capitals, Scott Murray, his daughter on my team. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that this year, just because I'll get to see him on some road trips and stuff, and can kind of chat him up about it. So, all right. Well, moving on, we're going to move on to our quick fire segment. So we're going to ask you these questions and just kind of want to get, 1 to 3 sentences at most. And I think some of these you probably have already touched on, so you can just touch on them and head by, but we just kind of want to get this couple of interesting thoughts on the Capitals coming up this year. So kick it off. What's the biggest storyline or question mark going into this season?
So for me, it's the health of Tom Wilson and Nicklas Backstrom. How will it work? How will it affect the salary cap? What will the team do when Backstrom comes back? How will the lineup change? And frankly, what position will the team be in while those players are out? Why any key players are out for that matter? So yeah, for me, it's a fairly obvious answer, but I think the health of Washington Stars is the biggest storyline.
Yeah, that's a big one for sure. Okay, pick 1 or 2 stars, breakout stars to this season.
I wouldn't necessarily use the phrase breakout star, because Washington has been picking kind of fairly low in the draft recently, so isn't really that in the pipeline. But I think Alexander Alexiev is someone to keep an eye on. He had an injury during the summer, had surgery on it. He should be back kind of the start of training camp or towards the start of the season, that kind of time frame. But if there are any opportunities to break into that defense, he should be the guy to do it. I think it's possibly the final year of his entry-level contract. So for me, it's a prove-it year for him, and I think he's a good defender, and we'll maybe see the best from him this time out.
All right. Who is one player that needs to bounce back from last season?
So yeah, this is one I've kind of already spoke about already, TJ Oshie. Not through any fault of his own, simply because he didn't play that many games, didn't produce as many points as the result, and obviously his role in the team was diminished. But for me, here's the player next year who I can say with quite a high level of confidence, I do think he will bounce back, and I think he'll be one of the most important players.
Excellent.
Nice. All right, one player that could be an X factor this season.
I would go left field, and then I remember that Alex Ovechkin plays on the team, so I should probably just say Alex Ovechkin. Yeah, if he's ticking, if he's staying healthy, if he's producing at a similar rate to last season, he's got to be the guy in terms of the X factor on this team, especially as we say with some of the issues that Washington have.
I mean, you gotta think, if he produces another 50-goal season, A, that's incredible, and B, that's going to have Washington right in the playoff hunt. So I would say that would definitely be an X factor compared to how much he puts that team on his back. But all right, give us one rookie or prospect that could surprise and make the roster out of training camp.
So similar to last season, Hendrik Lapierre, of course, had that magical moment early in the season.
I love Lapierre.
Oshie incidentally went wild when he scored. So yeah, for me, Lapierre, he's someone who plays with a lot of zip, someone who's really energetic, something that this Washington team needs. They need that young energy. And I think after a tricky start to the season, obviously he went back to junior last year, he grew into it in the second half. So for me, Lapierre, if there is an opportunity to play early in the season, would be the guy to watch.
Love it.
Yeah, I love him as a prospect too, for sure. So that's definitely a guy we're going to be watching. Okay, so what other players should fans be watching? We have not mentioned in this preview so far.
We've mentioned a lot of players, so this one was a little bit difficult. I was thinking about it earlier. I'll say Lars Eller. He was solid last season. I expect more of the same this year. 33 years old, someone who is trusted by the coaching staff, someone who plays an important role, someone who can just be thrown out in basically difficult assignments and gets the job done. So for me, he's someone who's relatively unspectacular, but an important piece of the puzzle in Washington if they continue to be kind of in the playoff picture.
I'd say we had not mentioned Lars Eller, which was interesting already. And then I want to throw another one at you, and I think he's still in the prospect system. Protas, right? Is that Alexander Protas?
Yes.
Alexei.
Okay. Alexei Protas.
Yes.
I love him. He's a big body. I think that he could be a big factor too. Sure, and then as my Alexa heard that. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. But yeah, I think he's another young guy to keep an eye on. And then another one I have to mention that we haven't mentioned is Anthony Mantha, just because gotta tie it in. So all right. Who will lead the team in scoring out of the forwards?
Alex Ovechkin.
Easy enough. Who will lead the team out of scoring in defense?
John Carlson.
Those are easy ones.
That's probably the easiest of any team right now.
There's just such a gap between Carlson and the rest of the defensemen, and obviously Ovechkin and everyone else.
It's so funny, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
All right, let's talk about some trades. Pick one player that you could see traded before the trade deadline.
I found this one really difficult because I don't necessarily expect much upheaval in Washington next season. And again, I'll caveat this simply by saying if it doesn't work out and if they're forced into making a change because the gamble didn't pay off, Charlie Lindgren.
Interesting. That's a good one to keep your eye on. It's all part of that storyline we've been talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Where will the Capitals finish in the standings? And will they make the playoffs?
So to answer two questions in one, I will say they'll squeak into the playoffs in the final wildcard spot in the Eastern Conference.
All right.
Oh, just pretty much the same as what they did last year, right? So
yeah.
See it? I can see it for sure. Okay, let's finish this off before we get to our article of the day. Finish out one bold prediction or hot take for the coming season.
So again, something I referenced a little bit earlier, and I think just about it might happen because he tends to be strongest at the start of the season, which is a theme we've seen in Washington for a while in terms of the older players. Alex Ovechkin to be the second highest goal scorer in NHL history by Christmas Day.
I love it. I love that. All right. Well, before we let you go, Luke, thank you again for joining us. We want to ask you for your article of the day. So please pick one article from the Capitals writing team, and it can be your own if you'd like, and share it with our listeners.
Well, we're currently a one-person Capitals writing team, so I had to go with one of my own this week. So I recently wrote a story titled 3 Capital Storylines to Follow in 2023. And it touched on many of the things that we talked about today in terms of the net minding and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, that's the one that I'd pick out. And as we move towards the season, I'll have more on some of the prospects that might be looking to break in, how the forward group might be looking, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's plenty to come, but that's the story at the minute that I'd point you all towards.
Thank you again for joining us, Luke. That will be it for this edition with the Capitals season preview. Make sure to sign up like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can get all of our previews. We will continue to roll out a team a day as we head into the season. And also make sure to sign up for the Morning Skate at morningskate.io to get all of your hockey news delivered to your inbox Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. That's going to do it for today's episode of this Hockey Writers Podcast preview show. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.